Tonight, I am pleased to introduce our graduate keynote speaker, Connie Willis. Connie is an acclaimed science fiction writer. Her novels and short stories have won a record number of Hugo and Nebula Awards, which are science fiction's most prestigious awards. She is also the first author to have received awards in all 4 categories of both the Hugo and Nebula Awards. Several years ago, Connie was inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, and 2 years ago, she was named a Grand Master of Science Fiction. We may have to ask her to explain that a little more. Connie is also a University of Northern Colorado alum, having majored in English and elementary education. Please join me in welcoming Connie Willis.
Good evening. President Norton, trustees, honored faculty, graduates, families, and friends, I'd like to welcome you here tonight to this graduation ceremony. I would like to congratulate all of the students receiving their graduate degrees, and I would like to especially congratulate the spouses and families and significant others and children of the graduates for putting up with them while they got their graduate degrees. As far as I am concerned, I have a little experience in this area. You all deserve medals. So thank you for all of your contributions to what's happening tonight. I also want to congratulate UNC and all the things that she was before she was UNC. The state normal school, although why you would ever name a school that educated teachers normal is beyond me. The Colorado State Teachers College, the Colorado State College of Education, and Colorado State College on being 125 years old this year. Happy birthday, UNC. Before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. President Norton told you some things. Yes, I did graduate from UNC, but it was CSC back then. And although I am a science fiction writer, I write about the future and the past. I write time travel novels about the Middle Ages and the Victorian era, and particularly about the London Blitz, about which more later. I'm married to Dr. Courtney Willis, who also graduated from CSC. I know, yay! And who is a professor emeritus in physics here at UNC. He also collects antique sewing machines, and he told me I had to talk about the sewing machines in my speech tonight. So I will. I will also talk about the London Blitz, and baseball, and gardens, and screen tests, and the measles. But first, I have to confess something. I hate graduation speeches. They are either full of sage advice from people who actually don't know any more than you do, or meaningless platitudes like, the future is yours to shape, or within every person lies the power to change history, or practice random kindness and senseless acts of beauty, or the world is out there waiting for you and all sorts of amazing and exciting things will happen to you. That is actually true. Lots of amazing and exciting things will happen to you, and a bunch of them will not be good. Your father will die, leaving you and your family destitute, or you'll get sent to reform school, or you'll get lost in the fog and drop your bombs on the wrong target, or things will actually go pretty well for a while, and at the height of your career, war will break out, or your sister and dancing partner will get married and leave you high and dry and washed up, or you will be too tall, or too skinny, or the wrong color, or you'll get the measles or polio. And who wants to hear depressing stuff like that when you're graduating? And if graduation speakers aren't depressing you, they're telling you stories about famous people, Winston Churchill and Jackie Robinson and Albert Einstein and Mikhail Baryshnikov, who you are extremely unlikely to become, let's face it. I mean, you have a much better chance of turning out to be Hermann Einstein, or Carl Reese, or Johanna Austerlitz, or James Wilcox, or a lowly verger at St. Paul's Cathedral, or a baseball coach at the Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children, or an 8th grade social studies teacher at Flood Junior High. Or, if you're not careful, you might end up being one of the ball players who taunted Jackie Robinson and called him names and dug their cleats into his leg as he was rounding first base. Or a woman known mostly as Mrs. Meany. Or the teacher who told Albert Einstein he would never amount to anything. Or Hitler. Oh, I do have some sage advice for you guys. Do not be Hitler. Most of us, though, don't actually turn out to do monumental acts of evil. You might just make a mistake, like James Gibbs, who decided to build a sewing machine after seeing a picture in a newspaper ad. Unfortunately, the picture only showed the top half of the sewing machine and not the bobbin, and so he made the machine completely wrong with only one thread instead of two. Or you might be like the RKO studio employee who watched a screen test and then wrote on it, "Can't act, can't sing, balding, can dance a little." The guy in that screen test was 33-year-old washed-up has-been Fred Astaire. And that screen test nearly lost him his chance at a movie contract. He was no stranger to bad luck. He had been sickly and skinny from birth, and his mom, Johanna Austerlitz, made him take dancing lessons with his sister Adele to improve his health. It did, and since Adele was a dancing whiz, she was the one with all the talent in the family. Fred was just her partner. It improved their fortunes too. And the brother and sister danced in vaudeville and on Broadway and in the West End and all through the 20s. And then she met an English duke and fell in love and got married. And Fred, since she was the one with all the talent, was washed up and out of a job. Someone finally suggested that he might try Hollywood, where he promptly flunked his screen test. Luckily, though, the head of the studio decided to give him a chance in spite of his wretched test and his enormous ears, and cast Fred as the second lead in a little picture called Flying Down to Rio. And the rest, shall we say, is history. Fred Austerlitz Astaire not only revolutionized the art of dance, but he inspired Rudolf Nureyev and Sammy Davis Jr. and Mikhail Baryshnikov. And he goes right on inspiring us today. The Tony Award-winning musical Billy Elliot, which some of you may have seen, was directly inspired by the dancing lessons story. And every dancer and choreographer today, from Bob Fosse to the cast of Glee, owes his or her dancing to Fred Astaire. You may think it's strange that a small, single act of enrolling a kid in a dance class could have such far-reaching effects, but it's actually not. That's because history, and I'm talking about the past, present, and future, your future here, is a chaotic system. And no, by chaotic system, I do not mean the state of your freshman dorm room. A chaotic system is one in which every single event, no matter how tiny and seemingly insignificant, is connected to every other. And something tiny can have an effect all out of proportion to the action. For instance, a railroad engineer named Carl Reese took his son Pee-wee to see a lynching tree so that he would understand the depths of social injustice operating in the South at that time, and ended up helping integrate baseball and bring about the civil rights movement. Hermann Einstein's 5-year-old son Albert got the measles, and Hermann gave him a compass to keep him entertained, and it resulted in the discovery of the theory of relativity and quantum theory, and yes, chaos theory. And that pilot who got lost in the fog, he was a Luftwaffe pilot fighting the English during the Battle of Britain. And because he was lost, he accidentally dropped his bombs not on the RAF airfield that he was supposed to, but on London, killing several civilians in the process, which caused Winston Churchill to bomb Berlin, which caused Hitler to bomb London, and to stop the Battle of Britain in favor of the London Blitz. But unbeknownst to Hitler, the RAF was almost out of planes and pilots. if he had kept bombing airfields like he was supposed to for count 'em, 2 more days, he could have marched into London unopposed and won the war. In a chaotic system, small actions can have huge consequences. Take Leroy Paige. When he was 12 years old, growing up in Alabama, he got caught for shoplifting by a truant officer known by all the local kids as Mrs. Meanie, and got sent to reform school. Leroy Paige, who you might know better by the name Satchel Paige, said it was the best thing that could ever have happened to him because it brought him in contact with a baseball coach who taught him how to pitch. In those days, African Americans were not allowed to play in the major leagues, but Satchel became the greatest pitcher the Negro Leagues had ever seen. That's what they were called back then. And he wasn't just a great ball player, he was sort of generally terrific, and he was very brave. During one exhibition game against a white team, one of the white ball players said, "I ain't batting against no," well, you know what term he used. So when he came up to bat, Satchel looked at him, and then he called the outfield in, all the way in, all the way in, and then he sat him down on the ground, and then he struck him out. Satchel Paige was possibly the greatest pitcher who ever lived, although he never really got his chance to be in the majors like he would have liked. He did go up to the majors, but he was 40 years old when that finally happened. He was a little bit too old, and but he was still Rookie of the Year and played in the series that year. So, but he also was so good that every white team that played against him thought he was the greatest pitcher in the world, and it was mostly Satchel Paige, along with the other great ball players of the Negro Leagues, that finally started people talking about integrating the major leagues and helped Jackie Robinson to get his chance. And Jackie succeeded against almost impossible odds, being heckled and called names and cleated and sent death threats throughout the entire season. But he was not overcome by that, partly because one of his teammates, a shortstop, a redneck southern shortstop named Pee Wee Reese, whose father had taken him to see a lynching tree, walked out on the ball field in Cincinnati in front of a jeering and dangerous crowd and slung his arm around Jackie's shoulder and changed the course of Major League Baseball forever. And the integration of baseball helped give rise to the Civil Rights Movement and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and our first black president. "The arc of the universe is long," Martin Luther King Jr. says, "but it bends toward justice and truth and courage and beauty." Remember I told you that one of the bad things that could happen to you is your father dying and you being left destitute? Well, that happened to Frances Hodgson Burnett back in the 1800s. Relatives took her and her family in. Relatives, it so happens, with a garden, which Frances fell in love with. She remembered that garden later when she began writing stories to put food on the table for her impoverished family, and one of the many novels she wrote was The Secret Garden, a children's classic that is still beloved by kids today. One of the many children inspired by that book was Rumer Godden, who wrote a modern version called An Episode of Sparrows, about a little girl who grows a garden in the rubble of a church bombed during the London Blitz. And that book inspired an 8th grade teacher at Flood Junior High named Mrs. Werner. She read it out loud every day after lunch to her class. Mrs. Werner had had polio and only had the use of one arm, so she read the book propped on her arm like this every day. That book was my first introduction to the London Blitz. I loved that book. I still love that book. And I went on to read all about Winston Churchill and Hitler and that Luftwaffe pilot and the vergers and other volunteers who formed the fire watch that kept St. Paul's Cathedral from burning down during the London Blitz. And I have written about them for my entire career. Isn't that amazing? Frances Hodgson Burnett inspires Rimmergodden, who inspires Mrs. Werner, who inspires me. A reform school baseball coach who's nobody even remembers his name, helps Satchel Paige, who helps Jackie Robinson, and so does Pee Wee Reese, who was inspired by his father Carl, and together they changed the course of history. That's absolutely the best thing about being in a chaotic system. It means that not only do acts of military might and conquest and brute force and size count, but so do small, seemingly insignificant acts of courage and good faith, and kindness, like bringing your kid a toy when he has the measles, or worrying about his health and signing him up for dancing lessons that you really can't afford, or trying to save a juvenile delinquent, or a cathedral, or reading a book you love to your class, even though it makes your arm ache to do it. And doing the right thing counts too, like Pee Wee Reese and Frances Hodgson Burnett's relatives. Which brings us to Mr. Wilcox. Remember James Gibb, the guy who got the sewing machine design all wrong? He took his totally wrong design to Mr. Wilcox, and the two of them became partners and produced the first chain stitch sewing machine. And if you want to know what a chain stitch is, there it is on the inside of your robes. But just as they had their business up and running, the Civil War started, and Gibbs, who was a Southerner, went home to fight. The company made lots and lots of money during the war, selling machines to the Army for sewing uniforms. But Gibbs's fortunes were wiped out by the war, and he was so poor at the end of it that he had to borrow a suit to wear to go north to beg his partner, hat in hand, for a loan. At least that is what he hoped would happen, that Mr. Wilcox would give him some money. It didn't. Instead, Mr. Wilcox said, "What are you talking about? You're my partner. I put your half of the money in the bank. Here's the bank book." And Mr. Gibbs went home a millionaire. He and James Gibbs Mr. Wilcox and James Gibbs went on to do amazing things. The machines they invented for their factories are the basis of all modern manufacturing. And their chain stitch, as I said, it's in every piece of clothing you've got on today, including your graduation robes. Their inventiveness quite literally shaped the fabric of our world today, and so did their sense of honor and kindness and compassion. Wilcox and Gibbs changed history, and so did Fred Astaire's mother, and Albert Einstein's father, and Satchel Paige's coach, and the St. Paul's Fire Watch, and Mrs. Werner, and you, all of you. You are all part of history, whether you think you are or not, and you will all, believe it or not, shape the future. The only question is deciding what part you're going to play in it. Are you going to be Pee Wee Reese, or one of the guys who threw the ball at Jackie Robinson's head? Are you going to be Hitler or Albert Einstein? Mrs. Meany or Mrs. Werner? A member of the Luftwaffe or of the Fire Watch? Because even though you are too old and too skinny and the wrong color, even though you can't see the whole picture, are too poor, have a damaged arm, are balding, and can only dance a little, you are still in this movie. So go get them. Change history. Shape the future. Practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. Bend that arc. Thank you.